Hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space and my last STAMPtember 2023 video. It is the end of the month, and as of this video going live, the very highly anticipated Tim Holtz STAMPtember collab set is now available as of right now. It will sell out. It usually sells out within hours. If you missed out, he has hundreds of stamp sets to choose from in so many different styles. I will have a link to the Tim Holtz stamp collection. They're all made by Stampers Anonymous. He's been doing this for I'm not even sure how many years it's been now. And yeah, hundreds of stamp sets. Hundreds of stencil sets. I'll have a link to his stencil collection as well. And yeah, for those not aware, STAMPtember is only through the month of September. It's with Simon Says Stamp and all of these brands that collaborate to sponsor STAMPtember. And they create these limited edition exclusive sets only available through Simon Says Stamp and only available while supplies last. But there are always so much to choose from. Like every year, there's more and more to choose from. And the whole point is to just celebrate card making and inspiration and creativity and all the fun things. So I went a little overboard and I had fun. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. So I just used basically every image in the set and I made 5 Christmas cards. So I pulled out a couple of older Tim Holtz stamps and stencils, one of his 3D embossing folders, some wafer die sets from Simon, all sorts of things. I went to town and had a ton of fun. So if you keep watching, I will show you guys how I made these cards. And like I always do, I will have links in the description box below the video to all the things. And let's get into the card making. So this is the Tim Holtz STAMPtember 2023 set. There's actually the stamp set and there's 2 stencils included with this stamp set. I will get into the stencils later in the video. Now, if you are not familiar with Tim Holtz stamps, they are made by Stampers Anonymous and they're all red rubber on cling foam. So if you're using something like a MISTI, you need to take out any of the inserts, or in my case, my waffle flower grip mat, because you need that space because these are on cling foam, which is much thicker than clear photopolymer stamps. And I had a piece of Simon Says Stamp smooth white cardstock in here. And this is when I was like, I can fit all of the images, so I'm going to stamp all of the images. When I first started these, I had no idea what I was going to do. I was just like, I'm just going to stamp them, and then I'm going to color them, and then I'm going to figure out the rest of my life. So I inked up the images with Simon's Intense Black ink, a good alcohol marker friendly ink, and inked everything up, stamped it twice just to make sure I actually got all of that detail. And then once those were stamped, I am going to use my Spectrum Noir Tri-Blend markers to color these in. And I'm super speeding up the coloring. I don't do anything groundbreaking, really. You can always still pause it or slow it down if you really want. I do provide most of my coloring. I do real-time coloring videos on my Patreon for my Patreon members. It's just one of the perks they get. But yeah, I just super sped this up. I kept the coloring, not only did I keep it basic, but I kept the color combo fairly basic. I went with traditional colors, which for me isn't something I do very often. I usually kind of, it's like, ooh, let's do purple, whatever. But I don't know. There was just something with these. I was like, I want to do like, red and green, and then I'll pull in some blue and, a couple other little colors here and there just to like sort of fill in certain things. But yeah, once I started actually coloring it, I felt very overwhelmed at first with like, there's all these images and there's all this variety. But once I started coloring and, everything just starts coming to life, I was like, oh yeah, this is fun. And it's fun. However, saying all this, I show at the end of the video, and I'll show like the insides of the cards at the end of the video. I stamped these images on the insides of my cards with just oxide inks, and honestly, you could totally get away with that too. You know, if you are not a colorer, images like this, and I've talked about this before with other images that are very hand-drawn looking, and they have all that extra detail. It's not just an outline. They look so good when you just stamp them in color. Like if you are not someone who likes to color, you can just stamp them with a color ink, or you could stamp and heat emboss them. You know, do them like, ooh, in metallics. That would look really nice. I'm getting more ideas. Man, I made 5 cards and I got 5 million other things to do, and the set's going to sell out. So anyway, whatever floats your boat. And I'm also excited because I'm doing all this, you know, ahead of time. I'm excited to see his live video and see what all the other makers made, because that is always, for me, just some of the best. I highly recommend, if you don't already watch Tim Holtz live videos, do it. Just do it. So much inspiration, so much product info, and when he's sharing stuff made by his team, it's just, my head is just exploding with all the ideas. So, anywho, I use my Spectrum Noir Tri-Blends to do all the coloring. Don't know if I had mentioned that, but again, I put all the caps on screen for the colors I used. Copic markers would work. I thought about like stamping these on heavy stock and using my distress watercolor pencils. That would have been fun too. Anything, you know. Anything will work. So then, of course, I went in with my Nouveau Aqua Shimmer pen, because they're Christmas cards, and it's whatever day it is when I'm filming this. I honestly don't even know anymore. You know, it's a day ending in Y. When do you not need sparkle? So I added the sparkle, and then I took my white gel pen and did what I always do, which is just add little highlights and dots and details and things, not following any sort of light source, nothing. I just added them wherever I thought they would look good. And with things like the sweater and the mitts and the little stockings, I followed the stamp image itself, like, and just kind of traced over some of the sketchy details just to give it that little extra something. So I did all of that, and then yes, I fussy cut every single one of these. And I filmed this one, the absolute most difficult one at all. And the rest of them were nothing compared to this. This one was, it took me a little bit, but honestly, I only have part of the footage to share with you because I get closer and closer to my face when I'm fussy cutting. That's why I don't show it in videos. That's the only reason why, is because I hold my scissors up and I hold up what I'm cutting, and it's like right in front of my face. But honestly, like my nose is almost in screen, really. And I wanted to show this though, because I've had people ask about this. I do have I think it's titled How to Cut Stamped Images. It's an old video, like one of my originals from a million years ago, but still the same thing. In fact, I might even be using the same type of scissors. These little cutter bees. These are the ones I love to use for fussy cutting. And the other thing is you can see I cut more towards like the inside of the scissors. I don't use the tips of the scissors, and I move the paper more than I move the scissors. That's how you get smoother cuts. And then also add to it, disclaimer, that I have been doing this technically for 20 years, but really I have been doing this since I was old enough to hold scissors, you know, unsupervised. It's just what I've been doing. So fussy cutting for me isn't difficult, because that is something with the Tim Holtz stamps. Other than some of the very old sets that there were some coordinating dies made available, I don't think any of them are available on the market anymore. But yeah, there aren't coordinating dies for his stamp sets, and a lot of them because they just don't need dies, you know. But anyway, I just zoned out and I fussy cut. I usually put on, you know, Netflix, whatever, or I've got music going or an audiobook or something, and I just zone out and cut, and I was done. So after I did that, I cut down some strips of Nina Desert Storm cardstock, and I pulled out the Christmas Element stencils from Tim Holtz. I think these came out last year. They're still available. His stamp sets, other than this specific STAMPtember set, the STAMPtember sets are an exception. His stamp sets don't retire, and I think it's the same for his stencils, but don't quote me on that one because I'm not 100% sure. But with other things, it's different. But anyway, this stencil set is still available though, just FYI. And there's like 1, 2, 4, 6, 8. There's like 12 stencils in this set. I love it. This is my first time using it. I love it. I love it. Because there's all these just big words for Christmas. And so I just taped each one down. I chose 5 different ones. I put them onto these strips of cardstock, and then I applied some white opaque texture paste over it. And I purposely applied the paste sort of messy so that some areas were thicker and thinner. Like I didn't want like a perfectly smooth application. I wanted that texture. So you can see me kind of go back and forth a little bit with the palette knife. And I have, since I'm doing like so much, off to the side, I just have a container with some warm soapy water in it. And I was just throwing each stencil into there so it can just soak. And I need to make a point of doing that more often because, oh my gosh, it makes cleaning my stencils up 5 million times easier. So they're all sitting and soaking because I'm going to use the other stencils from the set, but I'll get to that in a minute. Before I get to that, for my first background, I am using the Flurry and Pine stamp set. This is another oldie but goodie release from Tim Holtz. I forget what year this one came out to. I think it was at least a couple years old. Anyway, I'm using the Pine one, and I just put it face up on my desk, and I inked it up with Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide ink, and then I pressed my smooth white cardstock into it, and then I just took a tissue and rubbed it all over this because oxide ink takes some time to dry. So this way I'm smearing the ink. It kind of gives more color to the background. Plus, you know, it just immediately removes the need to keep things clean and perfect. I need to do that more often. I like it. It was fun. So I did that with the first background. And then the second background, I used the Flurry stamp. And same thing, put it face up on my desk. I'd use my anti-static powder tool on this panel of cardstock. And then inked it up with clear embossing ink, pressed the cardstock into it, covered this with Simon's Detail White embossing powder, and then I'm going to melt this with my heat tool, which almost turns into nothing on screen, but in real life it's just, you can see it, it's smooth and shiny, and that's what I was looking for. So I just keep tilting it back and forth in the light to make sure I got all the bits melted. And then again, if you're not familiar with background stamps from the Tim Holtz line like this, where there's like 2 in a set, they're kind of off sizes. They're not your standard A2 size. That's just not how he does things. And again, I kind of like it when I actually like start pulling things out and using them. It's like, it just makes you think outside the box a little bit. Like not everything has to be exact. So I ended up trimming these down to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. And that's when I decided all of my backgrounds will be that size just to make my life easier. So the one I did, the heat embossed Flurry background, I ink blended tumbled glass oxide ink, and then I grabbed a piece of just one of my extra pieces of Post-it tape just to keep me from getting fingerprints on the background. Because right now I'm still not 100% sure, you know, what's going on, where I'm going to place things, whatever. So I did the entire background with the tumbled glass. And then I went around the perimeter with Blueprint Sketch oxide ink, just using my blending brushes and then just kind of like blending that all together. And I liked that combo. I liked how it looked. And then when I was done and I cleaned up my work surface, you just wipe it with a cloth because the embossed background resists the ink. So any ink sitting on top of it, you just wipe it off with a cloth and then everything just pops to the surface again. So I did another background with the same colors of ink. And then I'm using one of the stencils that comes with that STAMPtember set. And I'm going to tape it into place with just little pieces of the same pixie tape I was using earlier. And then for this, I'm using some Nouveau Glacier paste. And I have an entire playlist on my channel of videos I've done using Nouveau Glacier paste. It's one of my favorites. And it's been a long time since I've used mine. I keep mine sealed with Press and Seal. I will have that linked next to the Glacier paste because especially more than any other paste I own, this stuff, you need to seal it. This one, this Winter White Glacier paste, I've had since they first released them. I don't even know how many years it's been now. It's the same container. It's been sealed with Press and Seal. I've used it many, many, many times. It has not dried out. Highly recommend Press and Seal. I've talked about it in a bunch of videos. But anyway, so I did that for that background, set it aside. Then for this background, I took that Rustic Wilderness oxide ink and I just blended it just onto this background. I wasn't worried about a smooth blend at all because this one, again, I'm going to use the stencil over it. I'm going to add, by this point, I knew which like stamped image I was going to use, etc. So I was like, just need to get the color down. It's going to be fine. So blended that onto this panel and then cleaned up my mess because I just had ink, you know, absolutely everywhere. And then I'm using the second little stencil that comes with that STAMPtember set. One stencil, the first one I used, has little stars. And then this one has little, I don't know what you would call these, like flurries, I guess, in a sense, kind of flurries, little starbursts. I don't know what the, you know, I don't know if there's a technical name for them or not. There probably is. Tim will probably have some cute little name for them. We'll learn that when we watch his video. Anyway, I did the same thing. I applied it over this background and then I applied that winter white glacier paste over it. Sealed up that jar real good. And then same thing. Threw this into that container with the warm soapy water along with my palette knives, all those things. And then after I was done everything, I just went and like rinsed everything off in the sink and life was great. So my final background. I used, first off, I sprayed the cardstock with some water. That helps soften the fibers so you get a better impression. And I'm using the multi-level texture fades embossing folder. There's a holiday knit. This is actually the very first time, I'm almost positive. This is the first time I've ever used one of Tim Holtz embossing folders. And does that mean I don't own quite a few of them? No, I've been collecting them for a long time. I just haven't used them yet. But anyway, it took me some fiddling to figure out what would work for me. But for me, so far, my Spellbinders Platinum 6, the original platform, 2 metal shims, and then I also needed to add a couple pieces of cardstock shims. I still might need to adjust this a bit in future videos. We'll see, but this worked pretty good. Yeah. And this is why I purchased so many of his embossing folders and yeah, I need to use them. So I did. I used this one. Yay me. Anyway, after I did that one, I went on to my sentiments, and this is why I keep all of my scraps cardstock, because I use them. I either am die cutting little things or ones like this are perfect for sentiments. So black cardstock, anti-static powder tool. I just put the sentiments onto just little acrylic blocks because that way I could just stamp them with clear embossing ink, covered them with that same detail white embossing powder. Had to restamp one of them because when I put the embossing powder on it, I realized I didn't actually get a good impression when I stamped it. So stamped it a second time. We're good to go. Got everything covered with the embossing powder, the excess tapped off, and then I melted all of these with my heat tool. And then when all of these were done off camera, I wiped off, I used that same pink cloth and I wiped off the excess anti-static powder. And I also trimmed these all down with my paper trimmer. Again, I just didn't even think to turn on my camera. Anyway. And then for the embossed background with this holiday knit embossing folder, I was originally going to leave it just white. There's so much detail in it, but I couldn't leave it alone. I couldn't. So I took that Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide ink and just blended that around the perimeter. And then once that's blended, this is now where I'm going to start assembling all these cards. And I'm not going to show like every little bit. It's pretty much the same thing. Once I get a system going, and you notice with all these cards, I did everything in sets. This is how I get, more things done, etc. Like I did all the stamping of the images at the same time, all the coloring at once, all the fussy cutting at once, all those stenciled strips on the craft cardstock. I did that all at once, etc., etc. So now everything is done. It's time to just assemble. So all of the cards, I adhered the strip of the Desert Storm cardstock with the stenciled sentiment on it. And then I wrapped some baker's twine around it, used my reverse tweezers to help, and then tied it in a bow. With this one, I cut an extra piece of the baker's twine. I thought it'd be really cute to attach it to the mittens, like how mittens have, or they used to, and sometimes for little kids, they have strings. I need that on my mittens. Honestly, I actually had a really good pair of mittens back in, not even back in the day, not that many years ago, that were meant for snowboarders. Have I ever been on a snowboard? No, I would break my neck. but they're meant for snowboarders, and they had like elastic bands on them, so I loved them. Literally, I wore those mitts until there was nothing left of them. And I live in Canada. It gets cold here during the winter. Winter gear is important to me. I still have not been able to find a replacement for those. They were by, I can't even remember the brand name, Roxy. But I still haven't found a pair similar to those, and I'm really sad about it. Anyway, I attached the baker's twine, as I showed, and then I pulled out an oldie but goodie tool. This is a brad piercing and like separating tool. This is why I don't get rid of my crafting tools. They stay in a drawer for that once every 10 years use. Same with this little brad. I actually I knew where it was. I'm shocked. But I attached that little brad, and I actually have links to those. That toolkit that has that tool, as well as the brads, because the brads are actually from Art Impressions. But anyway, I used the brad to make it look like the little mitts were hanging from it. Sometimes I have little, moments that I'm just like, oh, brilliant. Love it. Anyway. Got those adhered. And then again, just repeating the process onto every subsequent card front. So adhering the stenciled sentiment, wrapping the baker's twine, and then the images and the little heat emboss sentiments I pop up with little thin foam squares. This card I used the Simon Says Stamp Pointed Evergreens wafer die. Did a little die cut surgery and like trimmed down the tree, although I could have left it and let it hang off the top. I don't know. I wasn't thinking that I would have space for that. But anyway, I die cut that from some of Simon's Midnight Green. Yeah, Midnight Green cardstock. Adhered the stenciled sentiment, the baker's twine, popped on the image and the sentiment with little foam squares, and then moving on to the next one. Same thing. Getting everything adhered, wrapped baker's twine. These ones, I made it look like the stockings were hanging from the baker's twine, and then popped the little sentiment and the gifts into place with little foam squares. And then this card, I used the little evergreen trees wafer die from Simon, die cut from that same Midnight Green cardstock, and then adhered that to the stenciled sentiment strip, and then use my craft tacky glue, just little dots of it. You don't need to cover the entire backs of the trees. And then adhered that to the background, and then just flip that over, and then use my scissors to trim off the bits that are hanging off either side, and then wrap that baker's twine around this, tie it in a little bow, and then my Santa is going to get popped on with the foam squares, and then my favorite sentiment from this set, Dear Santa, define good. Love it. So I did that. And then on the inside of all the cards, I'm only showing this one, but and I'll show the insides of all the cards at the end here. But this is all I did. I just inked them up with the oxide inks I used for all the other steps. And then I chose another sentiment from the set, and I stamped that with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink onto the inside. And then I just adhered the card fronts to the card bases, and that finished them off. So they're all A2 size cards, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then I turn on my flashlight so you guys can see the sparkle, because it's fabulous. So I got sparkle and texture and some 3D embossing and stenciling. And I just, like I said, I had so much fun making these. Like, yep. And you totally could, even go further and make more. The only one that gets like really finicky is cutting out that wreath with the reindeer and his antlers. So you could skip him if you wanted to make a ton or do a design, because my original plan, I was going to stamp him and then die cut him with like a circle die. That would work too, so that you can avoid cutting around his finny. I don't regret it. I'm just saying, I know some people are like, you are crazy. Yes, I am. I own it. But again, it was worth it. I really did enjoy creating with these. And if you're, I mentioned in the beginning, like I'll have a link to the Tim Holtz like stamps and everything. He did just have a release like last week, I think, was his Stampers Anonymous holiday release, or earlier this week. I can't even remember. No, it was last week. those will all be listed as well, and they're on their way to me. Of course, I ordered them. So yeah, I do plan on using his holiday stamps for my Christmas card series that will be starting hopefully very, very soon. So just stay tuned, like always. But yeah, these are the 5 cards I made. I had loads and loads of fun making them. Like I mentioned in the intro, I will have links below the video to my blog post. I'll have a supply list with links to all of the supplies I used, showed, talked about, etc. All of that will be in the description box directly below the video for anyone who is interested. I will also have like my links to my social media. All of that will be directly below. And as always, thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I would love to have you. And I'll see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.